Ancient Asian travelers faced some of the most formidable natural barriers on Earth. Mountain ranges that reached staggering heights, stretched hundreds of miles across, and concealed dangers that tested even the most resilient explorers. They did not have insulated clothing, modern climbing equipment, or even reliable maps. Yet somehow, caravans of merchants, monks, and emissaries succeeded in crossing ranges such as the Himalayas, the Pamirs, and the Tian Shan. How did these journeys unfold? Did they rely on tools now forgotten, secret knowledge about the land, or networks of guides lost to time? And most puzzling of all, how could ordinary travelers have survived altitudes and climates that continue to challenge even professional adventurers today? The towering ranges of Asia were more than physical obstacles. They shaped cultures, economies, and entire civilizations. The Himalayas separated the Indian subcontinent from much of Central Asia, while the Pamirs and Tian Shan stood as formidable ramparts on the Silk Road. To cross them meant access to trade, political alliances, and religious exchange. Yet to attempt the crossing without preparation meant near certain disaster. These landscapes contained thin air, sudden snowstorms, and treacherous cliffs, which could easily engulf travelers unprepared for the task. The very fact that routes developed across them at all tells us much about human endurance and ingenuity. The most important clues about how ancient travelers moved through these highlands come from written accounts. Chinese sources during the Han Dynasty described emissaries moving westward through Central Asia in the 2nd century BC. Later, Buddhist monks penned records of journeys from India to China, often noting the perils of altitude sickness, violent winds, and starless nights. Accounts from Faxian in the 4th century AD and Xuanzang in the 7th century detailed long passages through snow and ice, with travelers suffering frostbite and starvation. These records do not provide technical instructions, but they highlight recurring challenges, giving historians a foundation to analyze how solutions might have been developed. One of the most critical factors enabling successful crossings was the knowledge held by local populations. Nomadic groups who lived in high valleys or along foothills were familiar with seasonal patterns and safer routes. These guides understood which passes melted earliest in spring, which rivers could be forded, and when storms tended to appear. Outsiders relied heavily on such expertise, since attempting to navigate blindly would often end in catastrophe. Archaeological evidence suggests that networks of hospitality were established, with traders carrying goods depended on mountain dwellers for shelter and guidance across dangerous stretches. Another key element was the use of hardy animals adapted to mountain terrain. Yaks, for example, thrived at high altitude, with thick coats and lungs suited for thin air. They were used to carry loads where horses struggled. In other regions, camels and donkeys accompanied caravans, though they fared better on lower passes. Historians believe that the choice of animals determined the exact routes people favored, since particular beasts could only cross specific altitudes. These animals not only carried goods and supplies, but also provided milk, meat, and hides, which were essential for survival in barren, snowbound regions where nothing could be gathered from the land. Ancient travelers lacked synthetic fibers, crampons, or oxygen tanks, but they did develop specialized clothing from local resources. Furs from mountain animals like goats and yaks offered rudimentary insulation, and woolen garments were layered for additional warmth. Simple footwear stuffed with dried grasses created insulation against snow. Walking sticks or staffs helped with balance on icy paths. Archaeological finds from Central Asian burial sites show travelers wearing fur-lined hats and heavy coats, remarkably similar to garments worn by mountain peoples today, which tells us that necessity shaped solutions still practical centuries later. Historians emphasize that timing was as crucial as equipment. Caravans did not attempt passes in winter, when storms would obliterate trails and bury markers under snow. Most crossings occurred during late spring or summer, when ice melted enough to create passable paths, but before rivers swelled dangerously with runoff. Written records stress that even delays of a few weeks could doom an expedition. Evidence also indicates that many trading networks scheduled their movements collectively, creating seasonal waves of caravans moving across ranges such as the Karakoram. This coordination provided both safety in numbers and a shared body of knowledge regarding the best conditions for travel. Food was a challenge, since agriculture in high mountains was impractical during journeys. Travelers carried preserved items such as dried meat, grains, and tea bricks pressed for efficient storage. Fires were essential for melting snow into drinkable water, and packs often contained portable flints or tinder to start them quickly. Some archaeological digs along old Silk Road routes have uncovered remains of portable stoves and clay pots, suggesting that cooking simple meals on the move was common. Salt, necessary for health at high activity levels, was often carried in large quantities. Survival depended not on comfort, but on careful rationing and minimizing waste. One layer that complicates our understanding of these journeys is motivation. Many travelers were merchants seeking profit, but others were religious pilgrims determined to reach shrines or spread teachings. Pilgrims often endured risks that seem irrational by purely economic measures. Buddhist monks crossed deserts and mountains in search of sacred texts, convinced that the spiritual value justified extreme hardship. The psychological strength drawn from religious conviction may have carried travelers further than material preparation alone. Historians believe this human drive explains why crossing routes appeared again and again across such terrible landscapes, despite repeated tragedies. The remains of travelers who did not survive have also provided crucial insights. Archaeologists in Central Asia have discovered frozen bodies, preserved clothing, and even remnants of pack animals along ancient passes. These finds confirm that exposure, exhaustion, and avalanches were constant threats. But they also provide direct evidence of survival strategies, such as how footwear was reinforced, or how crude snow shelters were used. Some bodies were found with religious objects, suggesting they were pilgrims, while others carried traded goods, linking them to commercial caravans. Together, these traces form a mosaic of the human struggle against nature at high altitude. Some researchers have suggested that early mountain travelers may have had techniques now forgotten. There are mentions in records of herbal remedies used for breathing difficulties or altitude sickness, though the plants referred to are not always identifiable today. Others propose that unique navigational knowledge, such as star observations or wind patterns, guided certain routes. While evidence is incomplete, these possibilities remind us that knowledge systems outside of material artifacts may have played an essential role in survival. Oral traditions among mountain peoples, handed down through generations, could have encoded practical techniques for crossing regions that outsiders would have struggled to navigate. The ability of ancient Asians to cross mountain ranges without modern gear was not based on a single invention or secret tool. Instead, it was the result of resilience, local expertise, animal adaptation, seasonal awareness, and an extraordinary willingness to endure risk. Today, satellite navigation, insulated clothing, and emergency rescue helicopters make altitude slightly less daunting, yet the stories of those who crossed these ranges thousands of years ago remind us of the raw determination behind every step. Ultimately, the mountains stood as barriers, but they also became gateways, shaping the flow of ideas, goods, and beliefs across the vast continent of Asia.